Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2083. This week on Cars Yeah, you best buckle up because we're celebrating the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion that takes place August 17th through the 21st at WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna, Seca. To get your tickets and learn more, go to weathertechraceway.com.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm in beautiful Mission Viejo with a very special guest, a guy you'll know from racing by the name of Mo Amari. Mo, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I am, Mark. Thanks for the warm welcome.
You're welcome. Now, before I give you a proper introduction, what's one little thing maybe people don't know about you, Mo?
I try and keep a lot of things people don't know about me.
Well, you have to expose one for us today. One juicy tidbit.
One juicy tidbit. You've stumped me right off the bat. I would say that I was born and raised in the suburbs of Dublin, Ireland, and I loved every minute of living in Ireland. But it's a small island, and as most of my generation did, we needed to get off the island, and I never went back.
Well, you've come a long way since those days of your youth in Ireland. Allow me to give you a proper introduction here. Mo Murray is the Senior VP and Program Manager at the Garage Team Mazda. His focus is on their motorsports in marketing strategy and brand integration. He spent a life in motorsports starting at an early age when he left Ireland to pursue his dreams of making a career in the sport that he loved. He worked as a mechanic and crew chief in the precursor to what is now the MotoGP. He created his own winning team, capturing the U.S. AMA motorcycle road racing title. He then joined Bombardier, overseeing their motorsports activities, including Indy Lights. Mo has worked in executive leadership roles with oversight of sales, marketing, product development, brand licensing, experiential and motorsports operations, and has also enjoyed success as a publisher and trade consumer show director. Today he enjoys off-roading in his Jeep and adventure motorcycle riding. Plus, he is a longtime participant in the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion and WeatherTech Raceway in both historic and professional races. We'll be back in just a moment, but first a word from our sponsors, so please give them a little listen, and we'll be right back. Buckle up. We're with Mo Murray. Covercraft's newest 5-layer indoor cover is especially engineered for indoor use, providing maximum dust protection when your vehicle's stored in the garage. Your 5-layer indoor cover is custom tailored with Covercraft's attention to detail, form, and fit with the quality and attention to detail that's been their standard since 1965. Even if your vehicle is always inside, dust and fallout can damage the paint, and an extra layer of soft, breathable material protects from accidental bumps and rubs. Covercraft protects cars, trucks, motorcycles, RVs, trailers, and watercraft too. Every one of my vehicles is protected with a Covercraft cover, custom fit to fit the car like a glove. And I have a deal for you. If you use the code YEAH21 at covercraft.com, you'll get 10% off your order plus free shipping. That's right, 10% off and free shipping. Simply use the code YEAH, YEAH21 at checkout. Covercraft, protecting the things that move you. Zengen, it's an oil analysis kit that allows you to sample your engine's oil and learn about its inner health with your personalized and detailed Zengen report. At only $39.95 and free shipping both ways, your Zengen oil analysis costs less than an oil change. It's really simple. Their easy-to-use sample kit takes less than 5 minutes to collect your sample and mail it back to their world-class labs. It's only 5 days, and they'll send you your own Zengen score via email. Your report measures 30 different data points, including contamination, metals, lubricants, additives, and a whole lot more. Whether you're buying or selling a vehicle, nearing the end of your warranty, heading out on a road trip, or caring for your vintage collector car, Zengen helps prevent costly repairs. allowing you to get the most value out of your vehicle. And Father's Day is coming. I know Dad doesn't want another tie or a pair of socks. This year, give Dad his very own Zengen oil test kit, and you'll make him smile. I did, and I'm so relieved to learn that my vehicles are doing just fine. Go to ZengenScore.com and use the code CARSYEah20 and you'll get 20% off. Boom! What a deal. Preventative knowledge and maintenance could save you thousands, and you'll rest better at night knowing your engine's condition is just right. That's ZengenScore.com and use the code CARSYEah20 today. I was tired of my rates for my collector car insurance going up every year for no explainable reason. My carrier seemed to be turning into a media company versus an insurance company, and I realized that a portion of my policy premium was paying for all those so-called free media goodies. So I did my homework, I talked to knowledgeable collectors, shopped around, and discovered American Collectors Insurance. They've been serving the collector car hobby since 1976. You last that long by properly serving your customers' insurance need, not with a lot of fluff. ACI is ranked the #1 online collector car insurance provider according to Google, Trustpilot, Facebook, and they offer their real person guarantee live support. No never-ending phone loops when you need help. Plus, because you don't use your classic car as a daily driver, you could save up to 40% compared to regular auto insurance. American Collectors Insurance provides agreed value policies. So if you experience a total loss to your collector vehicle or it's stolen, you'll be paid the amount listed on your declaration page, less any deductibles, of course. No ifs, ands, or buts. Give them a call today and ask for your free quote at 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. Tell them you're a friend of mine, Mark Greens at Cars Yeah. American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. So Mo, let's dive a little deeper in the corner, something you know all about. What an amazing career. And when you think about your career, you were a young kid in Ireland that loved motorsports and decided to, as you said in our pre-show chat, get off the island and seek out your adventure. Take us back on a walk through your career before we move into the present in the upcoming Motorsport reunion.
So growing up, I was in my mid-teens in the 70s, and the 70s in Ireland and its near neighbor England were glory years for motor racing, particularly for drivers who aspired to make it to Formula One. Formula Ford was booming in Ireland and England at that time, and Formula Ford and Formula Atlantic, some of those old, very exciting open wheel series were big. And so I just got hooked on it and started traveling to the races, finding any way I could to get to the race track. We only had one permanent race facility in the Republic of Ireland, and it was about a half hour from my house. So I used to hitch a ride and I'd go to the track. And my first exposure to racing, I went as a kid, a precocious kid, I went up into the announcer's tower to get a better view.
Oh, wow.
And the announcer saw me and he looked quizzically at me and asked me what I was doing there. And he asked me if I knew what a lap chart was. And I said, no, but I can learn. And so he handed me a pen and some paper. This, of course, is before computers and all that kind of stuff. So that's how the announcer kept track of the races. I would sit down, and as the cars went by, I would just keep a grid and create a lap chart. And I did that for a season, I think. And I'd get me the best seat in the house. I could see the whole racetrack.
That's incredible. Imagine someone trying to do that today. It never happened.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic sort of introduction to the sport for me. And then, the woman I used to get a ride to the racetrack with, her husband, her family ran the Corner Workers Club. And I showed up about a year later at a race to do my lap charting, and they were short a flagger. So she said, "No, you're a flagger now." Wow. So I spent quite a bit of time as a flag marshal. Had one very famous incident with a famous driver named Tommy Byrne, who got within inches of mowing me down with a Formula Ford, and I guess it became famous because somebody snapped a picture of it, and that picture is it's included in Tommy's book and in Tommy's movie that he came out with recently. So
you're the kid in that picture.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, Tommy's been a guest here on the show. Wonderful guy.
Tommy's great guy. And so I was a corner worker for a while, and then I started I got involved in motorcycle racing because of the corner working. They need flaggers too. And then I sort of befriended some guys who were racing and started working on their bikes and traveling to the races with them. And And, just one thing led to another. I would say I'm an opportunist.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And so I connected with a young Irish motorcycle racer who had aspirations to go big. And so we left on the boat one night and went to England. And he didn't make it in racing. He's a very successful businessman, but he didn't make it in racing. But I ended up working for other teams in England and then moved to Germany and worked for teams, won a European championship as a crew chief with a German team, won a German championship, worked in the GP level for a while, and then came over here to do the same. Ran a team in 88 here in the US Championship. And after a few years, I managed to find a sponsor who, I guess I was still the precocious kid. And I told the sponsor, if you pay for it, I'll win you a national championship. And he took me at my word, but fortunately I delivered for him. And in 1991, a rider named Jimmy Felice, we won the US 250cc road racing championship here in the US.
Incredible.
Based on the strength of that, Bombardier hired me. They were just starting their watercraft racing program at that time, and they needed somebody to run it. So they hired me and moved me to Quebec, and then to Florida. And then eventually, after 6 years or so, gave me responsibility for snowmobile racing also. And they had an Indy Lights promotion they did. So I was with them for about 8 years. They moved me to Wisconsin eventually for snowmobile racing. I was with them for about 8 years and left them and went into the motorcycle aftermarket. I worked for S&S Cycle, a big engine company. Worked for a couple of distribution companies, had my own agency for a while, worked for a magazine and trade show company. And then I was recruited to go join Yamaha to head up their parts and accessories and service business, including their performance brands in racing. I didn't run the racing program, but I was heavily involved because of our performance brands. And that got me back into the MotoGP paddock, because obviously back then MotoGP was coming to the US, I think 3 times a year at that time. And so it was a lot of fun. And I left them after about 6 years, went back into the trade show business for a little while. And then Zach Brown had a company called JMI, Zach now with McLaren.
Of course, yeah.
JMI had just been brought on to help Mazda restructure their motorsports, the marketing side of their motorsports business. And he recommended to them that they hire somebody and embed them in their marketing community in California. And I knew some people at Zach's company, and they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested. And so that was 10 years ago. I joined the Mazda family. I don't work for Mazda. I spent the first 5 working for JMI, Zach's company. And then I switched, and now I work for Mazda's integrated agency. Mazda has an integrated agency model, Garage Team Mazda it's called. And so that's who I work for, but I'm part of the Mazda marketing community, and I handle all of the marketing and the strategic development of their motorsports initiatives, integrating their motorsports back into the brand messaging. So,
whoa, holy cow. What a life.
Like I said, still trying to avoid ever having a real job.
Well, it sounds wonderful. And as we fast forward, of course, Mazda has had a long relationship with Laguna Seca racetrack and racing there. And I want to move into that a little bit, because we've been promoting this week the historic races, and as I've always called them, I've gone to 30 of them now, 31 of them now, and that's where I got my racing license, was the Skip Barber School there years ago. Love that track. It's so much fun. What is the Laguna Seca Raceway, and of course now it's WeatherTech Raceway, and the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion, that whole venture mean to you? Well, that week is my favorite week of the year. That's, I mean, for 17 years, that track was known as Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca, and it was, and to some of us, it still is Mazda's spiritual home. The diamond in their tiara is the reunion week, the Rolex reunion week, and they've had many other significant major events. MotoGP went there for several years. World Superbike goes there. IndyCar is back there, and obviously IMSA sports cars go there. So, and all those events are special, and they're great events to be at. But for me, the Rolex reunion is the one that I look forward to every year, and we typically go for both pre-reunion and reunion. So it is a week-long affair. There's so much going on the peninsula that week with all the car shows and everything automotive related that goes on the peninsula that week. And I'll be honest with you, I've been there, I don't know, a dozen times or something like that. I don't think I've ever ventured out from the racetrack. I spend all of my time at the racetrack. Yeah.
In fact, one of my favorite things to do is to bring a camper and stay at the racetrack when we're working. So, And for me, it's the diversity of cars that show up there. I'm a little bit of a history buff. I like the history of our sport, and that's why working with these Mazda historic cars is so much fun for me. But walking around that paddock and looking at the cars from, the very early 19-teens all the way up through the 70s and 80s, the era that I sort of grew up in, and especially when they bring Formula One cars, it's such a great event, and where you can walk around the paddock and meet people who are still racing a Model T, and then there's a Porsche 917, and then there's a bunch of different Formula One cars from the 70s and 80s, and it's an incredible week.
I tell people you'll see more vehicles that week than you will in your entire lifetime. And Bruce Canepa was our guest Monday, and he put it really well. He said you would have to go to dozens and dozens of events around the world to see all the different kind of vehicles that you'll see during Monterey Car Week, Pebble Beach Car Week, again, Laguna, Seca, the historic races. And this year, they've moved the event back a day. So there's 4 days now. Back when I first started going, it was just 2 days. Now it's 4. And it's nice that it doesn't run into Sunday, even though they'll have some activities then. So if you want to go to the Pebble Beach Concours, you don't feel like you're missing. Because that was always a struggle for me. I wanted to be at the track, but then there's all these other events, and you spend all this money to go down there, and you want to see everything. It's kind of impossible, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The Sunday activities, when I chatted to Barry and the folks at the track, the Sunday activities this year will be quite fun. Actually, I'm looking forward to them, but not the traditional on-track race activities that we've had in the past. But yeah, it's and if the sessions are short necessarily because a lot of these cars are old and some of the drivers are old, and so the sessions are short. But everybody gets so many sessions that if you miss, seeing your favorite car in one session, you just stick around a little bit or come back the next day and you'll see it again. I've spent quite a bit of time as an amateur photographer. And obviously Barry and the team up there have been very kind and always allowing me access to get out on the track to the photo holes and take pictures. And, where else are you going to capture photographs of these cars? Bruce is exactly right. You'd have to spend a whole year traveling to events to see the mix of cars that will show up at the Rolex reunion. And Bruce is somebody who knows about cars. I recently had a chance to visit his facility, and the collection up there is very special.
I took a couple years, before pre-COVID, I took a friend of mine I had reunited with who used to surf with him growing up in La Jolla, and he went off, became a doctor, and moved away, and he's become a very good photographer, loves motorsports and so forth. So I brought him with me, I think it was 2018, 2017, got him a photo pass, and after just the first day, I think it was Tuesday of that week, the Carmel by the Sea event that happens, we spend the whole day there, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm worn out." And I said, "Well, you got like 6 more days of this stuff. Wait till you get to the racetrack," because that's where he really, and he was he didn't, he was blown away. It's like, this is amazing. So I always tell listeners, if you have not been, you've got to go. It's just one of those things you have to do, a bucket list type item in your life. And as many times as I've been, and I think you're probably going to say the same, Mo, every year you never get tired. You just want to keep going back. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Now, you mentioned you love it when they bring the historic F1 cars. They're going to do that again this year. Are there some specific groups of cars that you really just love to watch run?
Yes, I would have to admit there are. So for me, I first fell in love with Formula One in 1976.
Oh, nice year.
The first year that they had the low air boxes, when they banned the high air boxes. And obviously that year was made famous much later on by the Rush movie and the iconic points battle between Lauda and Hunt. But the cars of that year, they really trigger my interest. And for about a decade, so 76 through about 82, the turbos had come in, and 83, the turbos started to win. And those turbo cars are much more complex, and so there's fewer of them around. Those V8 powered cars of that era are very special to me. Growing up in Ireland, in 1976, an Irishman, or somebody from the island of Ireland, he's actually from Northern Ireland, John Watson, won a Grand Prix, and that was the first time somebody from the island of Ireland had won a Formula One race. And he won it in a Penske PC4 in Austria in the summer of 76. And Doug Mockett owns and runs that same Penske PC4 now. And so when that shows up, it's one of those things that when you grow up and you mature enough to understand a little bit what nostalgia is and what those feelings are in going on in your heart, that when I see that car, it's like tasting that ice cream that you had as a kid, or hearing that song that was important when you were 17 years old. So that car particularly is one that I really find emotive. But all the cars that raced in that era, they were much shorter than modern Formula One cars. There were tiny little cars, and I can remember having a full collection, a full grid of 1/43rd scale diecasts of the entire Formula One grid. And I would lay out a track around my bedroom at home and have these little races. And now I go and I go to this event and I see all these same cars, but they're the real ones. They're full size. And for us, from the Mazda side, the sports cars are also, very iconic. And the era of sports car racing, a little bit later on, maybe into the late 80s and early 90s is the sports car era that gets my attention. But it's an interesting thing because having spent so much time in the motorcycle business and motorcycle racing world, there doesn't appear to be the same strength of bond or strength of passion towards the nostalgia side of the sport. And maybe it's because the vehicles themselves are smaller, or they don't physically look all that different from what we have today. But cars from that era or any era, they're so representative and they're so different from one era to the next that I think it's a very emotive thing. It's something that really inspires me to I go there and I walk around the paddock at reunion, or pre-reunion even better because it's much more relaxed.
Less people there.
Less people. And, it's not like going to a modern race where you stand behind the tape line and you look in and you see everything at a distance of 20 feet. With these cars, you can walk right up to them. You can chat to the people who are working on them or the people who are going to step in and drive them. And it's a really unique event. And I love going to WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna, Seca for that reason, for that week. It's a beautiful event.
It's fantastic. The first Formula One race I attended was the 1976 U.S. Grand Prix in Long Beach. And because I was living down in La Jolla growing up, I graduated from high school in 76. And I think that race was in March. It was before graduation, and went up with a bunch of buddies. And I remember Ferrari, Clay Regazzoni won that in a 312T. And to this day, when I see the 312T, I mean, it just brings back the emotion. And we were lucky because one of my friend's dad was involved somehow. He got us behind into the pits and we got to see the drivers. And, I think he was sponsoring something or probably writing big checks. I don't know what it was, but we got to go where no one else got to go. And I remember shooting a whole bunch of pictures. I still have a box full of those slides. I was shooting those slides back then. Yeah.
And of course, the 76 Long Beach Grand Prix, although they banned the high airboxes in 76, they didn't do it until they got back to Europe. And so that race high box still had the high airbox. And that Ferrari with the 75 car was all red. The airbox was white, was red. But in 76, the airbox was white with the little Italian flag pinstriping underneath it. And it's just the most beautiful creation ever.
Yeah, it's absolutely spectacular. We'll take a short break. We come back. I want to talk a little bit about challenges. I always ask my guests this question, so sit tight, keep the seatbelts tight, and we'll be right back. You listeners know that I'm a huge car care fanatic, and my friends at AutoGeek created their Wolfgang Deep Gloss Paint Sealant for perfectionists like you and me. Wolfgang Deep Gloss Paint Sealant is designed to provide long-lasting protection and a glossy, slick finish that, well, it's unmatched. The use of polymer technology ensures your paint is protected from environmental contaminants, those damaging UV rays, and lasts up to 3 months long. By providing the glossy look of carnauba wax with the longevity of a synthetic formula, Wolfgang Deep Gloss Paint Sealant is the best of both worlds. Go to autogeek.net to get yours for the best product selection on the internet today, along with their skilled technical support. AutoGeek.net is where I go for all my detailing needs. That's AutoGeek.net. I've discovered Linkage. It's a new quarterly publication and website that covers the automotive market, driving, restoring, collecting, and discovering your passion for motor vehicles. Linkage is about experiences, opinions, and values. Linkage is an actual informed, reasoned opinion based on first-hand experiences. A talented linkage team covers the automotive world. The people who share your passion and mine, smart, considered, rational, and experienced opinions. Ones you can learn from and grow. That includes our passion that drives auctions and the collector car market. So come with me and join us on this journey. And be sure to use the code CARSYEAH when you subscribe, and they'll give you $10 off. Boom! Linkage, geared for the automotive life. Subscribe today at linkagemag.com. 20, 50, or 100 years from now, will there be a workforce to care for the collector vehicles we love? With auto shop programs disappearing across the country, it's a question we enthusiasts have to ask. That's why I support the RPM Foundation, which exists to ensure that the critical skills necessary to preserve and restore these vehicles aren't lost to time. One of the many ways RPM, which is short for Restoration, Preservation, and Mentorship, is accomplishing this goal is through workforce development initiatives. The RPM Apprenticeship Program enables the next generation of artisans to earn a living while they learn the craft of restoring and preserving these vehicles directly from industry professionals. The Endangered Skills Program documents the process of masters training future craftspeople on a variety of critical skills in danger of being lost forever. For more information on how the RPM Foundation is driving the future of the collector vehicle skills trade, visit RPM Foundation today. They're one of the charities of choice here on Cars Yeah! All right, so we're back. I always like to ask my guests about a big challenge they faced, failure. Now, you worked in the motorsports industry. I mean, talk about challenges, talk about failure, talk about obstacles. It's like every day you face one. People like you that have stayed in that industry for their whole life really have to love it because it's got to be a bit of a love-hate. Is there a huge challenge you'd like to share with us? And more importantly, what was the really valuable lesson in that challenge?
That's a great question. I would say when I talk to people about motorsports, and we try and use in my current job with Mazda, but elsewhere in my career, I try and use motorsports as a teaching opportunity. And we tell people, motorsports is real-time problem solving. You've got to solve a problem by the next time the car comes back around on the lap. And that's really what it is. It's real-time problem solving. And you'll see in modern Formula One, for example, they'll have teams and teams of engineers sitting in England who are connected to the racetrack, and they're all working as the car's lapping the racetrack. They're all working to solve a strategic or a technical problem in real time. And so motorsports is a real-time problem solving exercise. For me, although I worked on the technical side of it when I was in my motorcycle days, I didn't really work on the technical side, or I'm not good enough to work on the technical side of the car racing side. But convincing, for me, the big challenge is finding the balance, convincing people that something that I'm so passionate about and that I love so much, that it has a meaning to them, or that I can show them a meaning in the sport. So that's always been challenging. And it's finding that balance between being too pushy with people and pushing my values onto somebody, or allowing them to discover the sport for themselves.
We were talking in our pre-show chat about the Netflix series Drive to Survive, and what you're explaining here in one of those shows, Christian Horner talked about the emotional drain at the end of a race, especially running two cars, of having to constantly rethink the race every lap for both cars of how they're going to win.
Exactly.
How do you keep that in your head? I mean, he's got a huge team helping him, but I can't imagine the stress. But I think the way you put it is great. That's one of those skill sets that some people never tackle or are unable to tackle, is real-time problem solving. Some people need to stop, think, sleep on it. You can't do that in motorsports.
No, not at all. And it's a very interesting dynamic. Once you get to the top levels of motorsports or any sport, whether it's collegiate athletics or whatever it is, once you get to those levels, everybody's good. There aren't any bad players. There aren't any bad drivers or riders at that level. Everybody's good. So being good is not enough. Being good is not going to raise you to the top of the list any longer. You now have to find that's something that takes you beyond just being good behind the wheel or behind the handlebars. And I often think of a driver like Michael Schumacher, clearly one of the best ever. But when Michael Schumacher left Benetton and went to Ferrari, in 2000. When was that? 98. He went there.
Mm-hmm.
The Ferrari was junk at the time. Ferrari hadn't won in a long time, and the Ferrari was junk. Berger and Alesi left Ferrari, and Michael Schumacher and Irvine went over to Ferrari.
Oh, yeah.
And the first year was terrible. And then a year later, they started to find their way. And a year after that, they started winning, right? And I remember I read a comment, I think it was Alesi or somebody had said a comment that, how come they didn't build me that car when I was there? How come he gets there and they build that car? What he totally underestimated was the role that Michael Schumacher himself had played in lifting that team up. That's where that magic is. It's the driver is the quarterback, and the driver and the team owner, you mentioned Horner, the team owner, their job is to motivate people to find that extra something and keep everybody working late at night, keep not in an oppressive way, not in a crack the whip kind of way, but keep everybody motivated that there's a higher objective here, there's a higher goal here. And the winning does not happen on the racetrack. The winning happens before you ever get to the racetrack. And I guess you asked about challenges and lessons. That's one I think that's very important. That a lot of people, I see a lot of young drivers come into the sport and they fully understand how they're going to spend all their money and how they're going to behave when they make it, but they can't tell me what they're going to do tomorrow to make it to get one day closer. And they don't have that work ethic or that determination. Frankly, I didn't have it. When you mentioned my career going in racing, I love to drive. I enjoy driving racing cars, but I never had the desire or the determination to be behind the wheel, to be the champion, to be the winner of the race. That didn't drive me. And therefore I would never have been successful, because it requires that complete dedication, that complete ability to push everything else off to the side and have a completely singular goal of taking your car or your bike or your team to the top of the timesheets every time, right? And that's why great athletes don't last very long. A good career in any of these top level sports is 8 or 10 years. It's very unusual for somebody to go longer than that. You could look at somebody like Rossi in MotoGP, who had a very long career. But frankly, the last few years of it, he wasn't performing at that level, that mental level, that emotional level. I think it's a huge toll. It takes a huge toll on a person. And it's a massive relief when drivers finally step away and say, okay, I'm done now. And that, constant every day, every minute, we got to find a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. It's the old adage that good enough isn't. Is very true in racing, that you've got it. No matter how good you think you are, somebody's going to be better than you, and you've got to find a way.
I think that's why that Drive to Survive series I find fascinating. You and I spoke a little bit about it before our talk today, that it's drawn in a lot of people that aren't really interested in the sport, because you see the personal side and the sacrifice and what it takes, and every moment you think, oh, it's going to get better, and then it doesn't, because a tire goes down, or
exactly.
Or somebody runs into the back of another team member. I won't mention Red Bull, but it's crazy. It's crazy.
And some of those things, if the car breaks or a tire lets go or somebody hits you or something, that's less of a challenge for some of these finely tuned athletes than if they simply can't find the performance. And just a few years ago, it was completely unheard of and almost unacceptable for a driver to admit that they had a weakness, for a driver to admit that that there was anything wrong in their makeup, because their teammate would pounce on them. Everybody would pounce on them and take them away. So it's kind of a relief, and maybe Drive to Survive has opened the curtains a little bit to see somebody like Lando Norris, who's a young kid. Lando's a young kid who's been thrown into this world with incredible pressure on his shoulders. Mm-hmm. To admit that he has some I'm not sure he goes so far as to say mental health challenges, but anxieties that affect
you.
His performance, and being able to admit that now, and being able to recognize that this world takes a toll on these. They're kids. I mean, you're
so young. Yeah,
I wouldn't serve half of these kids a beer without carding them. It's a really, really high pressure world.
No kidding.
And unfortunately, in the lower formula, that pressure now manifests itself, because they see Formula One as, well, that's the way we're all supposed to behave. So that pressure now has to come down to the lower formula, and that's
a very small window of opportunity.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's the healthiest environment to develop these young people.
Maybe not. Hey, let's talk about a special vehicle in your life. You've been around so many cool vehicles, cool cars, bikes, all sorts of things. Is there, or can you even pick one? But is there one that really stands out for you?
Well, you're right. I've been around very cool cars, but for me, part of the reason we're having this conversation is to talk about reunion and taking the Mazda historic cars up there. But Mazda has this collection of historic vehicles, and those four-rotor rotary engine cars, that series of four-rotor cars from 767 through to the 792, which was the 92 IMSA GTP car, they're just incredible. Those cars are just incredible. And when you, again, studying the history, and when you go back in history and understand the challenges that Mazda had to overcome to win the Le Mans race in 1991 were just monumental. I mean, it's quite a story that this little team that everybody had written off and said, you're wasting your time trying to pursue this rotary engine thing. So much so that the rules had actually changed for 92, and Mazda knew in 91 this was the last time they were going to have a chance to try and win Le Mans after going there for 21 years. This was the last chance they had to try and win with the rotary engine, and they just pulled out all the stops. It wasn't the fastest, but they knew they had reliability at a speed that they were comfortable with, and they had fuel efficiency at a speed they were comfortable with. And they knew that if they just worked to their plan and just stuck to their plan, that the others would fall by the wayside, or at least they hoped they would. They had evidence to suggest they would. And so the Mazda 787, 767, both of those we'll have at Reunion in August, are very special cars to me because compared to today's cars, they're quite simple, but incredible vehicles. And then in the collection, Mazda has a collection of these cars in the basement in Irvine. In the collection, we also have the latest Mazda prototype, the RT24P that we won its last race in last November at Petit Le Mans. And that's a program that I specifically ran. And so that Mazda RT24P that we raced in the 2021 season, that's a special car to me, especially the last time we ran it, because we invited Mazda fans to submit their names via a social media campaign we did. And we printed their names on the livery of the car.
Oh, nice.
So that car raced at its last race with, I don't know, a couple of thousand names on it of not special people, not special guests, not sponsors, just regular people who loved the program and submitted their names. And then we left the nose of the car without any signatures on it. And on the grid in Atlanta at Michelin Raceway Atlanta at Petit Le Mans, we handed out Sharpies and we allowed people to sign their names on the car. And
no kidding.
And it was a very special time. We knew it was the last race for that car, the last race for the program. And it's a 10-hour race. 3 hours in, we were 3 laps down, and we came back and won that race. So that was a fairy tale story, a fairy tale day for us. And so that car is a very important car for me.
Mazda, didn't they race at the Del Mar Grand Prix when they were doing races there?
Yeah. So GTP cars, we raced the 792 at Long Beach just recently this year. But back in the day, they raced at Del Mar. They didn't actually race at Long Beach. GTP cars raced at Del Mar in 92. A silver car that we had two of them, Price Cobb and Pete Halsmer, raced them in 92. And the story of that car is interesting because, as I mentioned, the people who ran the World Championship and Le Mans had made a rule change that rotaries were no longer allowed in the World Championship and at Le Mans for 92 onward. People like to say, well, Mazda won in 91 and then they got banned. That's not really the case. The rule set had already been approved and Mazda knew it was coming. But for 92, we weren't able to race rotary engines on the world stage anymore. We raced a thing called an MXR01, which was a Judd engined, essentially a derivative of a Jaguar XJR14 that Mazda warmed over. Beautiful car, very high performance car, essentially a Formula One car with fenders on it. We have one of those in our collection actually. But for 92, IMSA said, no, you can go ahead and race rotary engines here. So Mazda embarked on they had Lee Dykstra design the 792P, which I think is one of the most beautiful race cars, not just Mazdas, but race cars that was ever built. It's such an organically shaped. I mean, it's timeless. Even today, it looks like it belongs out on an IMSA grid. And it had a four-rotor, had the highest iteration four-rotor engine, the R26B, produced about 900 horsepower in its day. And we raced 2 of those in the 92 season with the intention of that being a development year. And then in 93, we would go after the IMSA championship. Unfortunately, we had a tough year. They got a couple of podiums. PreCovet got a 2nd place and a 3rd place during the year. But by the end of that year, Mazda in Japan had then decided that motorsports they didn't want to pursue motorsports any longer. And so the program was canceled. And when the program was canceled, that ended that program. And so that car was a 1-year car only. There were 3 of them built. One of them ended up hanging in a restaurant in Southern California for a year.
Wow.
That has since been bought, and I think Jim Downing has just restored that one. We can't find the 3rd one because I believe it was crushed in Japan. And then we have the other one. We have the PreCovet car. So the one that was crushed was Pete Halsmer's car. The one that we believe, the one that Jim has, was the one that was never raced. It was hung in a restaurant. So, but that was an incredible car. Absolutely incredible car.
No kidding. So here's an interesting question for you, Mo. If you were reincarnated as a vehicle, what would you be?
Ooh, I would have to say a McLaren M23.
Oh my. Okay, there's a special vehicle.
Yeah, McLaren M23, which Emerson Fittipaldi won the World Championship with in 74.
Yeah.
Raced in 75. James Hunt won the World Championship in 76 by 1 point.
Yep.
By then, of course, as we talked earlier, it had the low airbox. I think the low airbox version is the prettiest. And then by 70, I think it was 77, they replaced it with the M26. So I think the M23 is a timeless design.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I like to ask my guests about books, great books. Is there a great book you'd like to recommend to our listeners today?
Yes, I have a lot of book recommendations. Being a bit of a historian, I like books. I just finished reading. Jay Gerst wrote a book with Al Jr.'s story. That's pretty good. I enjoyed a really, really good book a few years ago. It's called Thunder in the Park, and it's the story of Tom Wheatcroft, who bought and reconstituted Donington Park in England, which Donington Park was an old pre-war circuit that fell into disrepair. And in the mid 70s, Tom Wheatcroft was basically a home builder, and he bought it and spent a lot of money with his dream of bringing Formula One back to Donington Park, which he did in '93 with the European Grand Prix, the famous race that Senna had that incredible opening lap and passed 14 cars or something on the opening lap. But yeah, that's a good book. You know, driver biographies are interesting to me. Prime Movers, the story of Ilmore, is another really interesting book. But yeah,
that book about Little Al, is called Checkered Past.
Yes,
and I had Jay as a guest on the show. We talked in depth about that. So I heard a lot of people really, really enjoyed that book. But there's so many cool books. You've listed a lot of great ones. So I'm going to be the ultimate provider of funds for you today. I'm going to enable you to jump into any race car and take it racing at Laguna Seca. I'll pay for the car, pay for the ride, pay for everything. If you had that option, what car would I put you in?
It would have to be something older than current, because I think current race cars, while the performance is very, very impressive, I don't think they have the same visceral experience as some of the older cars. I think there's too much intervention by electronic systems and very clever engineers. Oh, they might go around the lap quicker, but I don't know that they would provide the same
fun
experience. Around Laguna Seca, I would say the 792, the Mazda 792, or the 787 would be very, very much fun. Or something, you know, we have a series. If you want to think about the fun part of it, we have a series. Mazda has a series called the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series. Uh-huh. And, you know, the MX-5, the Miata, is legendary for its driving, its handling characteristics, and it's rewarding driving, put it that way.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a series where the engines are stock. The cars are modified a little bit to be race cars. They're on race tires, race suspension, race brakes, but the engines are stock. And as a momentum car, it's a car you really have to carry speed in the corners. And I think there's a lot of very powerful cars out there who will go very fast down the straightaways, and then you, particularly in historic racing, we see this: drivers we'll park them in the corners, go slowly around the corners, and then go fast down the straightaways again. I don't know that there's any fun in that. Being able to carry speed in the middle of a corner is, for me, a very rewarding exercise. Yeah. An MX-5 will do that. An MX-5 driven fast is going to deliver as much fun, maybe more than some very expensive cars that you might think of. So
yeah, it's a great way to go racing, that whole series. I've had lots of people on the show who've done that. Well, that is quite a stretch from a 792 or 787 to the MX-5, but I hear what you're saying.
And of course, being an old open wheel guy, something where I can see the wheels would be interesting too. And again, because it was the top series in Ireland when I was growing up, Formula Atlantic, and so a Chevron B29 with a BDA in it, that would be that'd be sweet. That would be sweet. So no kidding. When I was a kid in school, there was a driver in England named Allo Lawler, an Irish guy, who had a Chevron B29, and he brought it to Ireland for 2 races. And he went back to England in between the 2 races to his business. Yeah. But he left it. He parked it at a local gas station near where I went to school. His mechanic stayed to work on it for the week. And every day after school, I knew the owner of the gas station. Every day after school, I went down and the mechanic let me sit in the car, a bright yellow Chevron B29. And I absolutely felt that car still has an impact on me today. It's in England. I know the guy who owns it, but that car has an impact on me that lasts to this day. It's the most beautiful thing. And so maybe getting to drive that would be interesting.
You've been all over the track today.
I know, yeah.
For sure. Well, you've taken us on a really fun ride. It's going to be great to see you at the WeatherTech Laguna Raceway as part of the races coming up this August. You listeners, get your tickets now. Get your butts out there, because this is an event you don't want to miss. Could you leave us with a success quote or some words of inspiration today, Mo?
Sure, I can do that. Before I do that, I want to tell your listeners we'll have 3 cars there at the reunion. The 787 that raced at Le Mans in 90 and 91, the sister car to the one that won. The 767B that Elliot Forbes Robinson raced at Le Mans in 89, and the IMSA championship-winning RX-7 GTO that won the IMSA championship in 91, the GTO championship. Please stop by. We'll have the cars there. We're the most open and accessible people. If their listeners are at the track and they want to come by and have a look at the cars and take pictures and do whatever you want, please stop by.
Absolutely.
Delighted to meet race fans everywhere we go.
Cool.
In terms of a success quote, I had a conversation with a 13-year-old kid last weekend, 2 weeks ago at Mid-Ohio, who's an aspiring race car driver. And he wanted to spend some time with me, and I sat and talked with him a little bit. And I said, tell me where you're going to be in 10 years. And for a 13-year-old kid, that's impossible. But the exercise, tell me where you go. Well, I want to be a race car driver, and I want to be doing this. And I said, okay. So the question I asked him, and we alluded to it a little bit earlier, is tell me what you're going to do tomorrow to be one day closer to that goal. And that's what people set goals, and people talk about, their aspirations and all that kind of stuff. And they can very clearly identify how they're going to behave, or how they're going to spend their money, what they're going to do when they get there. But they don't have a plan for tomorrow. And you basically 10 years is 3,650 days. By this time tomorrow, your goal now is 3,649 days away. So what have you done to be one day closer? And that's what I like to ask people.
Great advice.
So
yeah, absolutely. How can people follow you and Mazda?
Mazda Motorsports particularly has its own social channels. We're at Mazda Racing on Twitter and Mazda Motorsports on Instagram and Facebook. And we post a lot of content about our grassroots efforts, about our MX-5 Cup, about our historic programs. We're very interactive on there. We do a lot of stuff on there. And me personally, I'm. People can find me at most racetracks, most weekends. I'm the goatee wearing guy in the Mazda jacket, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who's a race fan or anybody who's not. I love spending time with like-minded people.
Absolutely. Well, you can find links to everything on Mo Murray's show notes page on the Cars Yeah website. I'll post everything there. I want to do a shout out. Thank you to Barry Topke, who, of course, introduced me to Mo. Barry is a past guest here on Cars Yeah, and he's a key part of the team at WeatherTech Laguna, Seca Raceway, and the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion. Mo, thanks for being so generous with your time today and sharing an incredible history. I cannot wait to see you this summer. Until we talk again, I'll see you at the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.